Welcome to Sekulow Live. This is Jordan Sekulow, and this is an exclusive by the Daily Caller. The Steele Dossier author, Christopher Steele, testified he was doing a deposition related to a defamation case he's facing from 3 Russian oligarchs in the UK. And in this deposition, under oath, he testified that his emails were wiped and that he no longer has documents related to the primary source of the dossier which kicked off the FBI's probe Crossfire hurricane, which led to the appointment of a special counsel, Bob Mueller, the recusal of the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, and yet Christopher Steele doesn't say who wiped all of his communication, by the way, with Fusion GPS, all of his communication with the source, all of the documents are gone. So he was in this dispute saying that our Inspector General for the intelligence community, Thann, was wrong and was having to go back and rewrite some of the initial report, which, by the way, there's no evidence of that. But now Christopher Steele has admitted under oath he has nothing, no documents at all. And we've heard this time and time again from Washington. We shouldn't ever hear this again when people make assertions like this against the sitting president of the United States.
And my goodness, Jordan, I mean, whether you want to talk about Lois Lerner, Hillary Clinton, or Christopher Steele, it always seems to be the same when it comes to evidence disappearing, especially when it's in the form of electronic emails or electronic storage. Jordan, I think the American people see through this. But look, for me, it continues to come back to this shocking idea that Christopher Steele was ever seen as a credible source. I mean, we know the FBI knew the dossier couldn't be verified. It wasn't credible. Even Bruce Orr, whose wife Nellie had a vested interest in this based on her work at Fusion GPS. Even he knew that, Jordan. We also know that he was terminated for leaking, but the FBI continued to use him as a source anyway, even though he was terminated. They used him through Bruce Orr. And now we know that he wiped, translate that, deleted, or someone deleted his so-called meticulous records with this source. Jordan, it's really, truly beyond belief in so many ways. But look, I think it does shed light on one other thing that we learned recently, and that's the fact that John Durham is adding to his investigative team. Jordan, I don't think it takes too much to connect the dots why he might be adding to that team.
Folks, the ACLJ is doing work all across the country on all the issues that you care about, all across the world on the issues you care about. And we're able to broadcast it to you because of your support. We're able to do the work in our country because of your support. We're able to do the work internationally because of your financial support. No amount too small, no amount too big. It all makes a huge impact. Go to aclj.org and donate today.
It's a critical time for our nation and our world. With so many challenges facing our country, the work of the American Center for Law and Justice has never been more important. And during this time of uncertainty, there's no better way to support the ACLJ than through online giving. ACLJ Chief Counsel Jay Sekulow.
We truly appreciate your financial support. Without it, it would be impossible to do our work here and around the globe. And the best way to support our work is to make your financial gifts online at aclj.org.
Online giving, simple and secure. And by making an online gift, your support goes to work immediately, enabling the ACLJ to defend human life, to stand up for our good friend Israel, to work to uncover the corrupt deep state in Washington, and so much more. Make a difference today. Support the work of the ACLJ online at aclj.org. Every dollar makes a difference. Give today online at aclj.org.
Are churches and religious organizations eligible for the federal government's COVID-19 economic relief? So in the past, when the Small Business Administration, the federal government, has passed economic relief for businesses, usually it applies to for-profit corporations only. That means it doesn't apply to nonprofits, and so it wouldn't apply to churches. But at this time, when all organizations, businesses, for-profit, nonprofit are hurting because they cannot operate normally. Churches cannot have their services normally. They're not receiving the same kind of tithes or donations. Same for other religious organizations. Uniquely, in the stimulus package that was passed, the $2 trillion stimulus package that was passed to provide relief to individuals and to organizations and businesses because of the impact, the economic impact of COVID-19. For the first time, the Small Business Administration, under the guidance and because of the work of President Trump and the Secretary of the Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, has included religious organizations. You can apply for this, and what it's for, and this is important, is so that you can keep your staff on payroll. Second is mortgage and rents. So that's the key here, is so you can still pay for your building, whether you're owning your own building or you're renting your building, and so you can keep your staff on the payroll. Churches can absolutely apply, and so can other religious organizations, Christian and other. They can absolutely apply for this new stimulus money that's available for you. Stay up to date on all this kind of information that's coming out with this legislation. We're trying to keep you very updated with the facts, the information, and answering your questions at aclj.org.
Let's go through the list, folks. Hillary Clinton probably being the most famous of the missing emails. Peter Strzok, Lisa Page from the Crossfire Hurricane and Mueller team from the FBI and from the Mueller special counsel team, both when they were removed from the special counsel's team because of their conflict, because of their political bias against President Trump. When they were removed, guess what happened to their phones and their emails? Wiped. Totally wiped. So you've got it with Lois Lerner back during the IRS days. Her computer supposedly crashed and they couldn't recover the hard drive, even with all the technology that's available to the IRS, to the FBI. And now we have Christopher Steele testifying under oath in a proceeding in the UK where he's being sued for defamation by 3 Russian oligarchs who said he just made up the information in the dossier that referred to them. He's now saying under oath that he has absolutely none of the documents, none of the emails, none of the sourcing. None of it. It was all wiped from his electronic devices. Now, he does not go into detail in this report, in this deposition, how they were wiped or who wiped them. Did he do it? It's interesting. The timeline he lays out, he wiped this all about 5 days before the dossier was leaked by BuzzFeed. So he was all this information that was going to be in this dossier, this salacious and unverified information, to quote Jim Comey, it was all wiped before it got leaked. Think about that. And so now Christopher Steele has no documents, no information, and you realize what this put the country through. Because the FBI insisted, and this is in another article today out of the Washington Times, that the intelligence community's assessment of Russian interference had to include the Steele dossier, at least a reference. So they did it by an annex in just a 2-page summary. But they said it was so critical to their work at the FBI. Now, why was it so critical? Well, it's because this is what the FBI used ultimately to get FISA warrants. We know that. So it was critical for them to somehow get this included, even though they, quote, did not stand behind the material at the FBI. It was critical to get it included because they knew that if they didn't have it included, if they could not get it included, then it would have serious consequences, cause, quote, a major problem in their investigation. You mean a major problem because they would have nothing to go off of to get a FISA warrant? Robert's called in from Maryland Online too. Robert, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Yeah. Hi, Jordan. Hi, Thann. I wanted to ask the both of you, do either one of you have any idea who could have possibly deleted or wiped out the documentation and the emails and the other sourcing and communications that Christopher Steele used to put the Steele dossier together and then eventually have it leaked out, working with Fusion GPS and then having it leaked out that they believe that President Trump was involved in Russia collusion?
I mean, here's the problem. He doesn't, in the deposition that we have available to us right now, Thann, Christopher Steele does not say he wiped it or that some other, like Fusion GPS, or that it was hacked and wiped. He doesn't make any excuses or give any information. All he says, I'll read it. This is the question and answer from his deposition. The question is, the primary subsource debriefings by Orbis, that's Christopher Steele's consulting company, were meticulously documented and recorded. That's what Christopher Steele said, meticulously documented and recorded. And he answered, at the time. Then the question, but none of these documents exist, so they have all been destroyed. Answer, at the time when we wrote the report. But you say it was meticulous, but nobody is in a position to check that because the records don't exist? Answer by Christopher Steele, they no longer exist, but that is my assertion indeed. My assertion under oath. They no longer exist. Thann, he gives no explanation for why they no longer exist, but it stinks, it reeks when it was all we now know wiped clean just days before the dossier gets leaked to the public.
Jordan, it takes an extraordinary amount of faith, more faith than I have, that it was coincidence that 5 days before the dossier was leaked, that was when the wipe happened, and that it happened without Christopher Steele's knowledge. So while it might not be in that report, Jordan, that is just too convenient for me to believe it's a coincidence. Here's the one point of optimism I would give you, though. I think that those communications and how that purging happened, I think it will eventually come out. And here's why I believe that, Jordan. Two reasons. First of all, the commitment on the part of the Attorney General to get to the bottom of it through John Durham and others. But secondly, Jordan, how many layers of communications we are getting communications from. Think about Bruce Orr, who was inside the FBI. Think about his wife, Nellie Orr, who worked for Fusion GPS, who interfaced with Christopher Steele. Jordan, I think under the Attorney General's directions, while Christopher Steele's communications may be gone, communications from the other side, from the recipients, from the people he was dialoguing with, Jordan, I think those investigators will be able to turn that up. But I just want to circle back to your point. He might not be telling us why they disappeared, but I do not believe that they were wiped 5 days prior to the dossier being leaked without his knowledge. I don't have that much faith, Jordan.
I mean, he goes on in the deposition, and we're just getting pieces of this from the Daily Caller. After he says, I have no record of it, and the question from the attorney goes, you have no record of anything, have you? Answered by Christopher Steele, I haven't got any records relating to the creation of 112. Now, 112 was just one part of the report related to these three Russian oligarchs suing him for defamation. But the questioner goes a step further. Indeed, you have no information relating to any of the other materials or in the memorandum from the dossier. Answer from Christopher Steele, no. They were wiped in early January 2017. What occurred in early January 2017? The leak of the Steele dossier published by BuzzFeed.
Yeah, and I think it flows from the top, ultimately, Jordan. I really do. I've said it many times, but I think it flowed from the 7th floor of the FBI. When you've got a director of the FBI who brags about the meticulous records that he keeps, he's very careful to document every conversation that he has, but then it becomes clear that he's only careful to document to cover his own trail because he's plenty willing to leak them to a friend who will leak them to the press and violate all manner of secrecy or security when it comes to protecting the United States or the United States officials. So, Jordan, I think it was just an atmosphere inside the intelligence community where this kind of thing was seen as permissible because James Comey and others in leadership would do it. And again, Jordan, I would maybe also circle back to this. I mean, we knew that there were 17 errors across Carter Page's applications when it came to the FISA court. And now we learned last week that 100% of the applications that the Inspector General reviewed had significant errors in them. Jordan, that's why the Inspector General is coming back to the United States Senate to testify, and that's why I continue to believe people are going to be prosecuted over this.
Folks, the ACLJ is doing work all across the country on all the issues that you care about, all across the world on the issues you care about. And we're able to broadcast it to you because of your support. We're able to do the work in our country because of your support. We're able to do the work internationally because of your financial support. No amount too small, no amount too big. It all makes a huge impact. Go to aclj.org and donate today.
It's a critical time for our nation and our world. With so many challenges facing our country, the work of the American Center for Law and Justice has never been more important. And during this time of uncertainty, there's no better way to support the ACLJ than through online giving. ACLJ Chief Counsel Jay Sekulow.
We truly appreciate your financial support. Without it, it would be impossible to do our work here and around the globe. And the best way to support our work is to make your financial gifts online at aclj.org.
Online giving, simple and secure. And by making an online gift, your support goes to work immediately, enabling the ACLJ to defend human life, to stand up for our good friend Israel, to work to uncover the corrupt deep state in Washington, and so much more. Make a difference today. Support the work of the ACLJ online at aclj.org. Every dollar makes a difference. Give today online at aclj.org.
Adam Schiff, you remember that name? He was the member of Congress. He led the impeachment effort against President Trump. Well, he's back at it again. Now, he's called for a select committee to investigate the Trump administration's response to COVID-19.
After Pearl Harbor, 9/11, we looked at what went wrong to learn from our mistakes. Once we recovered, we need a nonpartisan commission to review our response and how we can be better prepared for the next pandemic. I'm working on a bill to do that.
While we're in the middle of responding to the crisis, and we haven't even reached the peak of the death toll of the number of people who will be infected, Adam Schiff back playing politics again because he is obsessed with what? Taking down the president.
When it became publicly known, which was as early as late December, and then reports started coming in January of this new respiratory virus in China, we lost precious weeks.
As Intelligence Committee Chairman, he was so wrapped up in impeachment during when all this hit that I'm not sure that there was a slow response on both sides because no one was looking at this.
They knew at the same time this was happening. They were being briefed on it, on COVID-19. They moved forward with impeachment articles they knew would not lead. There was no way possible, if you even got all the witnesses they wanted, it would never lead to 67 U.S. senators voting to remove the president. But they distracted the entire Senate. Do something for your constituents for once. They're hurting out in L.A. and in Hollywood. There's a high number or level of people with COVID-19. How about focus on that and not focus on trying to stir up partisan politics? It's wrong. It's wrong, and we're going to watch this committee at the ACLJ to see how it forms, because I have a feeling Adam Schiff will be on it. And what does that sound like to us? Mueller Part 3. Welcome back to Jay Sekulow Live. This is Jordan Sekulow. Can you just believe this? I mean, Christopher Steele testifying under oath this deposition in the UK that, well, he no longer has his emails. They were wiped. He no longer has any documents related to the primary source of the dossier, which led to Crossfire Hurricane, which led to the appointment of a special counsel to try and find collusion or conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia, which led to FISA warrants on American citizens and the spying on the Trump campaign and the Trump transition, which then led to a Mueller report which found none of that. No collusion, no obstruction, but then this, I guess, just urged by the House Intel Committee led by Adam Schiff to keep going, that there must be something here we can get the president on. So they went to a short call the president had with the president of Ukraine, and they made that into an impeachable offense and impeached the president in the House. And, of course, the president was acquitted by the Senate. But all of this ties together, and it all starts with Christopher Steele, who now, in a deposition, says he has access to no documents at all. Thann, I do have a question about whether or not Christopher Steele, the entire dossier, was a work of complete fiction, basically.
Oh, sure. So do I. But I have no doubt that he had documents of some sort. I don't believe they substantiated the dossier, but I believe he had communications with all sorts of people inside the FBI, particularly Bruce Orr. I'm sure he had consultations with the other people that were working on compiling the dossier, Jordan. And quite frankly, that's why I think this deletion of them 5 days before the leaking he would have been motivated to do that. Look, if he had some sort of inclination that the dossier that he could not substantiate was going to be made public, what would he be incentivized to do? He'd be incentivized to delete all sorts of communications that then it could come back on him that he knew the dossier that he had done the work on couldn't be substantiated. Now, he would also be incentivized, Jordan, to say exactly what we know he said, is that I had meticulous records. I kept meticulous records, but guess what? I don't have them now. I believe he doesn't have them now, but what I don't believe, Jordan, is that they substantiated the dossier. In fact, I would tell you, if we had them, I think they would show exactly the opposite, that he knew, just like Bruce Orr did, that the dossier could not be substantiated.
Megan with a great question called in from North Carolina on line 3. Megan, welcome to Sekulow Live.
Thanks for taking my call. I actually have two questions. One is, what would happen to us if we were to delete this kind of evidence? And two, does the NSA have any of these missing information?
So I think, listen, the information, could it be found? I don't have enough intelligence information to know. And remember, Christopher Steele was an intelligence agent. So if he wanted to wipe this clean, he probably knew how. What kind of technology to use, whether it was smashing iPhones like the Clinton campaign and BleachBit and other technological ways to get rid of this information. But Thann, I kind of go to you, and then I'm going to answer that first part, Megan, about what would happen to an ordinary citizen in a trial like Christopher Steele. I can answer that really quickly. If you were in a defamation trial and you needed to prove, hey, listen, this wasn't defamation because I've got all these facts to back it up. At least it wasn't done in a malicious way. And that, defamation is a pretty high bar, but what you have to show is that you at least weren't just doing it maliciously, that you had facts to base this on. If you go and under oath and say, I've got no facts, I've got no documents, everything was wiped clean, and it may have been wiped clean by me, because he doesn't say who else did it, so that kind of implicates him, right? I mean, if he's not pointing the finger at anyone else or any kind of technological problem, he says wiped. So someone did that intentionally, and it points to him. Well, then he doesn't have a lot to fight back with. I mean, what evidence will he use to refute the allegations of defamation when he says, I got no documents, I got nothing I can show to you? I mean, but so Thann, to the first part of the question, an ordinary citizen in an ordinary trial in the United States would be in serious trouble, especially if they were, if the government had brought them to trial for any kind of criminal matter, and all their evidence, all of their, whether it was all their financial information or anything else, suddenly had been wiped clean. When they had no documents and no evidence to support their position. So basically, they would have nothing to defend themselves with.
It'd be destruction of evidence and obstruction of justice. I don't really have much doubt about that, Jordan. I would say a couple of things, though. First of all, the point you made about the difference in technological sophistication between Christopher Steele and, say, Hillary Clinton. Look, we all knew when she said, you mean like wipe it with a cloth, that she was not being genuine. However, we also know that she's probably not an IT expert, so maybe that slides a little bit more easily than it could have. Christopher Steele is, Jordan, this is what he does. He gathers information, so there was not an accidental deletion of his information. Whether he did it or someone else did it, he would have known how to back up and secure his information. He can't be exculpated from that. But the other thing I would say, Jordan, here's again what gives me comfort, and I want to keep coming back to this because the Attorney General, Bill Barr, has been very scrupulous on this fact, and he has now said that people were trying to, quote, sabotage the president. And here's the line that gives me hope, Jordan. He says, if people broke the law, and we can establish that with evidence, they will be prosecuted. And Jordan, I know we're talking about evidence disappearing on today's broadcast, but guess what? I think that evidence can be uncovered through a different means. Christopher Steele may have deleted his side of those communications. Jordan, I'll make a prediction for you. Sometime over the next year, as John Durham and other people's investigations start coming out, I think we're going to see these communications, but we're going to see them because they were able to draw them from the other side of the communication.
And this ties back into this push, another article, the Washington Times, this push by the FBI when the intelligence community was going to issue its initial assessment on Russian interference in the election, in the 2016 election. The FBI even though the intelligence community didn't want to put it there, pushed very aggressively to at least get a footnote or an annex to their report. And ultimately, they got an annex to their report about the Steele dossier. They got a 2-page summary that they believe was critical to their investigation. And then we know why it was critical, is because it was the only basis for Crossfire Hurricane. It was the only basis to go into the FISA court and get a warrant to spy on an American citizen, Carter Page, and spy on the Trump campaign and Trump transition.
Yeah, it was the only thing they had to go on, and it couldn't be substantiated, Jordan. I mean, look, I think when you circle back to the Christopher Steele deletion, he knew exactly when this wiping happened, and we know exactly when the dossier was leaked to BuzzFeed. They were only 5 days apart, and I just don't believe that could be a coincidence. And if you want to tie it into the FISA report, Jordan, this is why I brought this up earlier, but I really do think it's important for people to understand this, because there are two main problems here. The first one is the one that we've been focusing on mostly today, that this seems to have been a deliberate action by the intelligence community to use information that they knew was unreliable and to depend on it for the issuance of many of these investigations. But the second thing, Jordan, is just how widespread it is. I mean, we knew previously that there were 17 errors across these Carter Page applications, and at the time, here's what the Inspector General said about that. He said, "The concern is that this is such a high-profile, important case. If it happened here, is this indicative of a wider problem? And we will only know that when we complete our audit, or is it isolated to this event?" And as they dug into that investigation a little bit more, Jordan, they looked at 29 FISA applications. Guess how many of those 29 they found significant and substantive errors in them? All of them. All 29 of them. So whether you're talking about the dossier or the FISA applications or any of this that I think is a systemic effort to undermine the President of the United States, that second point, just how widespread it is both a problem. But Jordan, circling back to your original question, that's why I think the evidence still comes out, because so many people were involved. They're going to find it from one source or another.
Folks, the ACLJ is doing work all across the country on all the issues that you care about, all across the world on the issues you care about. And we're able to broadcast it to you because of your support. We're able to do the work in our country because of your support. We're able to do the work internationally because of your financial support. No amount too small, no amount too big. It all makes a huge impact. Go to aclj.org and donate today.